are continuing our discussion with the candidates here in the city of Quincy for the municipal election that's coming up on November 7th. Next up, we want to welcome candidate for Ward 6 City Councilor Deborah Riley, stopping by to tell us a little bit about herself, about her campaign, and about what she'd like to do if elected to the city council. So, Deborah, nice to meet you, first of all.
Same here. Same here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. This has been great. It's been a great opportunity to learn about folks and their candidacy, both incumbents and newcomers like yourself, right?
Yes, I'm a first-timer.
Yeah, so tell me the Deborah Riley story and how we got to this point in your life.
Oh, gosh. Well, we only have 30 minutes, so I'll just say I'm a local real estate agent. That's sort of my day job. I've been in Quincy for a little over 30 years, been in Squantum, Ward 6 for a little over 20, married, 2 children, and, excited and scared at this opportunity.
Okay, all right. What was it that kind of motivated you to run this year?
Very simply, choice. I wanted to be able to have a choice and offer the voters a choice in Ward 6. In the last election, there wasn't a choice. Granted, pandemic, a lot of other issues may have contributed to that, but I believe that when you go to the polls, our democratic process requires us to have choices to make. And right now, I'm offering a choice in Ward 6. There's choices in Wards 2 and 4. 1 and 3 and 5 are uncontested.
Correct. Yeah.
And even our at-large, there's 3 candidates and 3 positions, so not really a choice there.
Right. So do you think with the mayoral contest this year as well, that may increase voter turnout?
It certainly will.
Yeah.
I mean, a mayor's race always increases turnout, and there's choice there as well. So I think that will even more so increase turnout and really make for better candidates all around.
So 30 years in Quincy, what happened before that?
Before that, I grew up in Billerica.
Okay.
Ended up on the South Shore, chose Quincy as my community.
Yeah.
I was living in Nashua, New Hampshire when I met my husband at work and came down here because he was a South Shore guy.
Okay, all right. And obviously something appealed to you to make you stay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful community. I mean, I don't know if I could live in a place that's landlocked again. You know, the coastline, the Blue Hills. I mean, there's a lot to love here in Quincy.
Sure. So what do you think the city is doing right, Deborah, and what would you like to see done differently?
There's a lot of things the city's done well. I think our schools are great. I think our natural resources are wonderful. I think our city services are top-notch. As far as what I think we could do better, I'd like to see a little more communication, both in my ward and citywide. A little more transparency, I think, with how money is spent, projects are prioritized. There's a lot going on in the city right now, so those are the areas I'd like to see maybe a little more improvement.
Okay, so how does your professional background kind of set you up for success as a Ward 6 city councilor?
Well, I don't know if people realize, but most real estate agents are really self-employed sole proprietors. We work under a brokerage usually, or we open our own, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for being our own marketing, our own sales, our own payroll, our own tax people. So you really have to learn to kind of wear a number of hats in order to be successful at it. And I've done okay.
So you think your financial background in particular would be a strength for you on the city council?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, prior to real estate, I worked for Fidelity Investments in technology. I've managed my own money, and my husband and I have, worked really hard to really make our lives comfortable. And a big part of that is our home. Our home is a big part of our wealth, as I know most residents in Quincy feel the same way. So everything I will do will be from the point of a homeowner and a taxpayer and what's important to them.
Okay, so as a real estate agent, obviously you've seen the dramatic increase in property values, and that couples with the dramatic increase in property taxes.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I've seen the market, I started at the top of the real estate market in 2007. I saw it plummet, and I've seen it climb to a point that, even real estate agents that have been around longer than I have remarked that they've never seen anything like this.
Right.
So yes, the benefit to the city is an increase in value automatically increases the amount of money collected without necessarily needing to increase the rate.
Right.
but that is something that I hear a lot of. It's becomes a burden,
Yes.
certainly for seniors and for people struggling. An increase in property taxes is a big deal.
Yeah, so I mean, as you well know, there's been a proposal for a residential tax exemption. Is that something you'd support?
Absolutely.
Really?
Boston has it, and there's no reason why a city like Quincy couldn't move in that direction. It's a little bit disappointing that it hasn't gotten much traction. I know there is a resolve in the city council and one or more committees.
Yes. Yep.
And so I would like to see that conversation furthered in a way that even if it was a modest credit at some point, initially, but I would like to see that as something that gets moved forward. I think the residents could use a relief, and more importantly, it promotes owner occupancy. Because really, in the city of Boston, that's one of the reasons why they do it is to promote owner occupancy. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of absentee landlords, having the bulk of the housing tied up, and that's not good for regular folks who just need a place to live.
Supply and demand.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. Because rentals aren't the same as home ownership.
Yes.
I know that rentals serve a purpose
Yep.
for a lot of people at different points in their lives, but I don't know too many people who are renting who wouldn't want to be homeowners.
Okay.
And right now, that's a really hard transition to make.
Okay, so that'd be something you would support.
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Speaking of, you lead me right into my next topic of rentals, in particular in Ward 6 and some other areas of the city. Short-term rentals have become an issue.
Yeah.
It led to a new ordinance actually in the city.
It did.
To limit those.
It did.
Yeah. Is it a problem in Ward 6?
Well, it is a problem.
Yeah.
We know of one house in particular that has been extremely problematic. But no, people seem to forget that wasn't the first one. There was one a little further down the street that really started that conversation with the city. Short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO was all brand new at the time.
Yep.
There were no regulations, and that's where the ordinance, I believe, came out of. And I've been against it since the beginning, for the same reason. It takes properties away from potential home buyers who need places to live. And it's really more of a monetary consideration. People will pay X amount, and if they can get X amount per night or weekend or week, it's really a business. It really acts as a business, and I think that takes away from an inventory of properties that should go to homeowners.
Okay, so you're opposed to short-term rentals?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think the ordinance is no less than 30 days.
30 days,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
I think
do you
30
think that's a good
I
rule
think
of
it
thumb?
sets the right,
Yeah.
it puts the stake in the ground of where it no longer would be a viable business model for
Okay.
people who are using it in that way.
Okay. What other priorities do you see in Ward 6 that need attention?
I think we need to improve communication. I think there's a number of things like cell phone towers that went up. I know there was talk of a sailor's memorial in Marina Bay that got a lot of flack. I'm only hearing, bits and pieces of that. I think that traffic is obviously an issue, and I know Traffic and Parking has done a good job of putting up some signage. I'm not sure if it slows people down. We need to work a little bit better on that. Those are pretty much the issues that I'm hearing
Okay.
about.
So on the issue of communication, Deborah, how would you address that if you were elected?
One of the things I'd like to do is regular mailed communications to
Oh,
homeowners.
okay.
There was
The old-fashioned way.
Well, there was a real void in any mailed communication, really, in the ward for quite some time, and that seems to have picked up, I know, with an election, and certainly people talking more about communication. All of a sudden, there's a lot of mailings, but I'd like to see, more regular, newsworthy communications.
Okay.
Not just an update on something really a hot button issue.
Oh, okay.
Trash delays, things like that. I mean, there's always ways to get information, but navigating online anywhere now is challenging. There's so much information. So a little newsletter, maybe quarterly or twice a year, would
I
be
see.
nice.
Okay.
I'd like to see maybe a Facebook page. That needs to be policed a little bit. Comments and things can be a little Wild West in online, but we don't really have a ward Facebook page. And regular office hours, those really went by the wayside with COVID, I think.
Yeah.
for a lot of politicians, but I'd like to see that returned.
Okay. Does there need to be a kind of a civic association, do you think, or some kind of
Yeah,
public group?
22 years in Squantum, and there have been some
Yeah.
over the years, and some organizations that were tied to like Star of the Sea Church, which of course is no
Right.
longer.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see that come back as a way to communicate, and also to communicate real time with people, face to face. Because again, online can be very can get a little frustrating.
Okay.
Whereas I
Yeah.
think when you're face to face with people, people don't say things in person that they will feel comfortable saying online.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that come back. I'm not sure if it would be one Ward 6 Civic Association, or trying to coordinate from the 3 different areas of Ward 6, being North Quincy, Marina Bay, and Squantum.
Oh, okay. All right. Interesting. So does Ward 6 need a community center, do you think?
Well, my hope would be, we can segue right into the Squantum School topic.
Yes, please. Yeah.
My hope would be that that building could serve
Oh.
in that capacity. I know we have the First Church of Squantum, which is where I do yoga a couple of times a week. I think the Scouts still meet there. Brady Academy does Irish Step there. They've been there a long, long time. So they've served in that capacity, but not being a public building. I think the Squantum School would be a nice, the new school would
Yep.
be a nice way for residents to gather and use it for that purpose.
Okay, so you do support a new Squantum Elementary School?
Yes,
you
absolutely,
do. Okay.
absolutely. My kids went through Squantum School,
Okay.
and the old part that's like a furnace,
Yes.
and then the new part that's like a refrigerator. I know that building quite well. I was secretary, treasurer, president of the PTO.
Oh, okay.
I spent a lot of time in those buildings,
Okay.
and they are 2 buildings. So yes, of course, moving that conversation along, it's nice to see that that's advancing.
Yeah, I know that there's some concern about losing the Wendell Moses playground in back there, so would you try and preserve as much of that as possible, I guess, right?
I haven't heard specifics on the plans,
Right,
but I
yeah.
expected that it would be constructed behind, and then the new school opened, the old school torn down. That seems to be the model. My expectation would then be the parking and the drop-off and everything would be more in front instead of in back. I'm
Right.
not sure what the status of the playground is. I mean, that's an important part of our community. So,
Right.
my hope would be that whatever is sacrificed for that is really given strong consideration. And I have to believe it wouldn't be all of it, but some portion of it might need to be
Sure.
sacrificed for the school.
Okay. The big white elephant in the middle of the room, Deborah. we can't talk about Ward 6 without talking about the Long Island Bridge issue.
Yes,
Yeah.
just such a big topic, and it's such a heartbreaking issue, really. I guess my short answer to that is I drive through the area of Mass and Cass pretty regularly, at least once a week, and have been for several years, for various needs to get into Boston. And I don't think those people are waiting for a bridge. I don't think they're waiting for an ordinance. What is there now is really complete anarchy. It's not. It's lawlessness. It really needs to be dealt with, and people who need services and are ready for services, because that's another thing too. Sometimes people are just not ready for their road to recovery or their bridge to recovery. But when they're ready, we need to have beds available, and we need to have services, and we need to be able to provide for those people when they're ready, and we need to make sure that their sobriety is really solidified. And I think Long Island is a beautiful place to do that. I don't think they need a bridge to get there, because if they're through their initial detox, if you will, then what they need is some time and some support, and they can get that on Long Island. It's a beautiful place to be well.
Okay, so you do not support rebuilding the bridge, obviously.
Certainly not as the sole means of access. I
all
think, I think 9 years ago when the bridge was shut down, I don't see why they couldn't have scrambled to put together some sort of ferry service that at least allowed some continuity of services there. Now the place is so run down, and it's completely overgrown, and they're talking $40 million to refurbish those buildings and $80 million to build a bridge. I mean, I really doubt that the people at Mass and Cass will be around when those services are ready. And again, I drive by there regularly. I know people that own businesses around there. It's way beyond a bridge, and it's way beyond an ordinance.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
So if you were elected to the city council, you would support the city's efforts to fight the bridge rebuilding?
I mean, I would like to see cooperation between
Okay.
Quincy and Boston to do better. You know, I don't think, you know, being in real estate, we do a lot of legal stuff. You know, we get in people's legal business, and I tell people that, you know, you don't want to resolve your issues in court. It's very expensive, it's very time consuming, and it's not very friendly way to try to resolve differences. So I would like to see the two cities work together better to find solutions that aren't in court.
Okay, all right. Speaking of budget, can we talk a little bit about if you are elected to city council, probably one of the biggest responsibilities is voting on the city budget. What are some of your priorities when it comes to spending?
Yeah, so my understanding, and again, this is all new territory to me, is that, you know, the budget is prepared by the mayor and in the finance office, I guess, and the city council votes on it to accept it or to reduce or eliminate line items. So
Right.
I guess I'm realizing they don't have a big input into what goes in there. They just get to work with what is presented. So, you know, the priorities are obviously public safety being number one probably, and close second would be education. I mean, depending on people's positions, they might flip-flop those. You know, I think it's great that we're addressing some infrastructure projects with the roads and really addressing the sewer, which was causing a lot of pollution and contamination in our waterways. I think there's an awful lot going on right now. I'd like to see some things buttoned up. As somebody who just had a car repair for $1,500 for struts and stabilizer bars, you know, there's a lot of construction going on, so I'd like to see things a little bit more phased, you know,
okay.
and I'd like, again, communication so that people know which intersections to avoid and which roads to avoid. It would be nice if there was a way that we could communicate that out to constituents, but you know, public safety and education is obviously the two most important things.
Okay. In Ward 6 specifically, how would you rate the roads and services, if you would?
Improving.
Okay.
You know, improving. You know, we certainly in Squantum we live in our own little island, if you will. I mean, it really is. So I don't hear too many complaints about that. I know there were some cell towers that went up on a private building, a condominium building, that really caught neighbors by surprise and really angered a lot of folks. I think the communication on that could have been better.
Okay.
And you know, the problem is when people don't know about a public meeting, you can't say they didn't show up to oppose it if they weren't really aware. So that's my understanding of what happened there. So
Okay.
that's one of the issues facing the Squantum people.
Another big one across the city is development, Deborah, right? Being in real estate, you deal with it almost every day, I'm sure.
Yep.
Do you feel that development is appropriate right now in the city?
It's gone at breakneck speed.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it looks like a lot of buildings are starting to all look the same, and I think that they serve the same demographics. A lot of high-end rentals aren't really helping the people here, you know, that are already here or that would, you know, find themselves needing more space or whatever. So I'd like to see a little bit more diversity. I'd like to see some over 55 housing.
Oh.
You know, it was something that I've been talking about for quite some time now. The great thing about over 55 housing is it doesn't, you know, burden the schools because we're all done with that. So I'd like to see some over 55 housing. I'd like to see the 10% affordable mandate really adhered to in development projects.
Okay.
So right now developers are allowed to pay a fee in lieu of, and that allows those monies to go towards affordable housing projects. But I really like the idea of sprinkling in affordable units into a market-based development because it just makes for a more balanced community. So that's something that I think we could work a little better on.
Okay. Another issue, if you are elected, you'll be faced with the proposed lease of the Quarry Hills property up at Granite Links. Have you given some thought to that?
Yeah, I've actually been pretty involved with
Oh.
the group that has, you know, brought to light some of the concerns, a real grassroots citizens advocacy group. And so that's really all I have to go on, other than I did watch the 2 city council meetings last November and this February where there was an effort to try to bring forth, I don't know if they were going to really bring forth a vote, but it was certainly discussed. And so I don't really have a good sense of what the urgency is. 99 years is a long time, and it doesn't seem like this is something that really needs to be talked about right now. There's still 33 years remaining on that lease. And there's a number of legitimate concerns. The athletic fields are really in poor shape. I mean, I remember when those fields were opened, my son was one of those kids who was one of the first to play on it before the restrooms were open, and everything was still a little bit of a work in process. So 20 years later, what was done is tired, and the access to the Blue Hills would be nice. Certainly a little bit more public access on some of the more pristine and groomed portions of that land would be nice. And then there's the oversight. We do want to make sure that the city is receiving their fair share. I presume that they are, but it would be nice to have some documentation that just shows that everything has been calculated properly, and that they're receiving it. In terms of an extension or even a modification to the current lease, I think the city can ask for a little more.
Okay. All right. So at least as proposed right now from the administration, the 99-year lease sounds like you have a lot of questions about it.
It just seems like it's premature, and I do
Okay.
think it's in committee, and I think it would be wise to leave it there
Okay.
until these questions are answered. The other concern is obviously the RCUD Drive, and I know MassDOT I participated in that Zoom call, that public meeting, and I know they're working on it, but the design phase is expected to be completed in May of 2025. So we're still a long way out from any permanent solution to that traffic, and it's a tricky spot. So I think even what could be envisioned is going to be challenging. It'll take time to see whether what they offer is really going to improve it. The road was only intended to haul dirt from the Big Dig to fill in the dump.
The dump,
So,
yeah.
the road was never really intended. And of course, there's another road that goes out the back to Milton, but nobody would be in favor of opening that up. So
Right.
I do think that all of those issues really need to be flushed out a little bit more before it would be wise to even bring it forward again before the city council.
Okay. All right. Have you thought about, if you are elected, what committees you might like to serve in on the city council?
Finance committee.
Okay.
I definitely am
Sure.
a money person. I'm not really much of a marketing person, even in my own business. That's not my superpower. My superpower is numbers and
Okay.
looking at finances, and I tend to take a very conservative approach even in my own life. So it's all about cost-benefit analysis, and what's going to be the most benefit to the taxpayers. My primary focus, Joe, would be to be really speaking from my own behalf. My piece of the earth. My husband and I, we have our house in Quincy, and that's the most important thing to us. A lot of other projects and initiatives in the city really don't benefit me personally, but anything that affects my tax bill and my personal property rights is very important to me.
Okay. How's the campaign been going so far, Deborah? What have you been doing? Yeah.
Well, it's finally off the ground.
Okay.
There's a lot of regulations around campaigning
Yeah.
and campaign finance, so I finally have an account set up. I have a treasurer, someone who's been kind enough to fill that role because you can't do it yourself.
Correct. Yeah.
I have an online, I have a website and a way to accept donations online, which has proven to be very beneficial because people have been very generous so far. I have a campaign kickoff event on September 19th at 6 o'clock at the Squantum Yacht Club, so I hope people will come by and say hello and show their support. So that's where I'm at so far, and now that Labor Day's over, I have this interview and a few other events that I've been invited to participate in, so it's all moving along.
Have you learned anything about the city and about Ward 6 in particular since starting this campaign that you didn't know previously, or do you look at things differently than you did before?
I've been working on just being a good listener.
Yeah.
So like the cell phone towers and the Sailors Memorial, I guess those were things I was sort of unaware of,
Okay.
or unaware of the feelings of the constituents. I knew about the cell towers, but that's a pretty, people are pretty angry about that one. So I'm just learning what's important to people. You know, it's not so much that an issue is completely unaware of it, but you know, you're learning what's important to people and what matters and what's noise. Sometimes there's a lot of noise and people don't necessarily care so much about it.
Door knocking? You out door knocking with?
I've been outdoor knocking, again, with lists and things that the city had provided, you know, the taxpayer records and the voter records rather. So I'm trying to get a little bit better organized with that and knock on the right doors. I actually reached out to quite a few politicians. They were all, you know, sitting politicians. They were all wonderful, and they all said knock doors and knock on the right doors.
Okay.
So I am working on doing that in addition to my day job.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah.
Which overlaps a little bit.
Well, you know, it's interesting. As a realtor, you deal with a wide demographic, I'm sure, and you've seen the city change, you know, in the past 30 years that you've been here. Do you think the city does a good job of reaching out to the changing demographic?
I don't really see any blind spots or
Okay.
anything. I mean, I do think the city does a great job. I think, you know, you can certainly see a shift over the last 20, 30 years that I've been here, and I think the city's done a good job of trying to embrace all people. Like I said, my focus is really on homeowners and people who are invested in the city, who call it their home, who call it their primary residence. And that's where the whole idea of a tax credit, a property tax credit, really comes into play, because it's where you vote, it's where you file your tax returns, it's the address that's on your driver's license. So I don't know what the demographics of people are here that don't fall into that, you know, that are just sort of passing through, or they're on, you know, some sort of work assignment, they're here on a temporary basis. But, you know, my focus is on people who really call this their home.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to share right now?
I don't think so. We had a long list of things, but
We touched on all the things.
I think we did.
yeah.
Public safety, the tax credit, occupancy. One of the things we didn't talk about that I think is important that I do hear from residents is the promise of an urgent care facility. You know, when the Quincy Hospital was closed, and I know there's a lot of you know, there's still a lot of angst over that. I personally went to the emergency room in Quincy for just, you know, sore throat type of thing.
Sure.
And right before it closed, I would say that the quality of care had certainly diminished. So I don't think that closing that facility was necessarily a bad thing, but we were promised a 24/7 urgent care facility, and I think there's a tremendous need for that, because your only other option is emergency rooms, which are overburdened. But unfortunately, I don't see that on the radar. So I would like to see that as something that the city, you know, tries to take a look at and brings forth, so that we have the ability to get, you know, when you say to yourself, does it need an x-ray? Does it need stitches? You know, those are the kinds of things we should be able to get from an urgent care facility, as opposed to going to an emergency room and overburdening our emergency rooms.
Okay.
Other than that, I think that's it.
Okay.
I think we covered everything else,
Okay,
Joe.
good. You mentioned a website. What is it?
It's electdeborahriley.com.
Okay.
And my email address is electdeborahriley@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Good to talk to you, Deborah. Nice to meet you.
Same
and
here, Joe. Nice
thanks for
meeting you as
stopping
well.
by. You're very welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Good luck on the campaign.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching us here at AEM Quincy. I'm Joe Catalano. We'll see you next time.